You've been lied to. Every time your rent goes up, they tell you the same thing. Supply and demand, inflation, the market. Wrong! That's not what's happening. On November 24th, 2025, the Department of Justice settled an antitrust lawsuit against a company most Americans have never heard of. The charge? Running what prosecutors called algorithmic coordination among competing landlords to raise your rent. The company is called RealPage. So if you live in an apartment in America, there's about an 80% chance they helped to steal your money. Actually, it's even worse than that. Because while RealPage is busy hiking your rent, there is a second, even more secretive algorithm quietly deciding if you're even allowed to have a roof over your head. You aren't just being overcharged, you're being blacklisted. Let me show you how this works. In downtown Seattle, there's a neighborhood called Belltown. About 9,000 market-rate apartments. ProPublica investigated this neighborhood and found something wild. 10 property management companies control 70% of those apartments. All 10 use the same software to set their rents. That software is called YieldStar, made by RealPage. Every landlord who uses RealPage agrees to share their private rental data with the company. What they're charging, what their occupancy rates are, what their competitors down the street are charging. RealPage takes all of this data that's supposed to be confidential between competitors, and feeds it into an algorithm. The algorithm then spits out a recommended rent for each unit every day. So you have competing landlords, supposedly competing against each other for your business, all using the same software, fed by each other's data to set the same prices. Do you think that's it? I am just getting started. In 2017, RealPage's CEO, Steve Wynn, was on an earnings call bragging to investors. I'm going to read you the exact quote. One large property company managing more than 40,000 units found it could make more money at 94% occupancy than at 97%. Let me translate that. A landlord used to think, I have empty apartments. I should lower the rent to fill them. That's how you make money. RealPage taught them the opposite. Keep some apartments empty. Raise prices on the rest. You'll actually make more money if you don't fill every unit. Here's what that means for you. In cities where RealPage dominates, there are apartments sitting empty on purpose. Not because nobody wants them, because keeping them empty lets landlords charge you more for the ones that are available. Fewer available apartments equals lower supply equals higher rent. In 2022, ProPublica published their investigation. Lawsuits started flying. Senators demanded answers. In August 2024, the Department of Justice filed an antitrust complaint against RealPage. The charge? Violating Section 1 of the Sherman Act. That's the law that makes price fixing illegal. Here's what the evidence showed. One landlord told RealPage they started increasing rents within a week of adopting the software. Within 11 months, they'd raised rents more than 25%. In November 2025, RealPage settled. Under the settlement, they have to stop using competitors' real-time data in their algorithm, accept a court-appointed monitor for 3 years, cooperate with ongoing lawsuits against landlords who use their software. But here's what they didn't have to do. Pay any damages. Admit any wrongdoing. The company said the settlement brings the clarity and stability we have long sought. Clarity, stability. Not, we're sorry for what we did to renters. But wait. It's not just about how much you pay. It's also about whether you can get housing at all. Meet Safe Rent Solutions. This is tenant screening software. When you apply for an apartment, the landlord runs your information through SafeRent, and the algorithm spits out a SafeRent score. If your score is too low, you get rejected, automatically. In 2022, a woman named Mary Lewis applied for an apartment in Massachusetts. She had a housing voucher. She'd paid her rent on time for 16 years. She had references from previous landlords. SafeRent rejected her. The management company told her, we do not accept appeals and cannot override the outcome of the tenant screening. There is no beating the system. The system is designed to beat you. Mary Lewis sued, and in November 2024, SafeRent settled for $2.3 million. Here's what the lawsuit found. The algorithm disproportionately gave lower scores to Black and Hispanic applicants. It penalized people for using housing vouchers, legal government assistance, without considering that the voucher guarantees most of the rent gets paid. It relied heavily on credit scores, even though credit history doesn't predict whether someone will pay rent on time. The judge called it algorithmic discrimination. Under the settlement, SafeRent can no longer display a screening score for anyone using a housing voucher. But here's the thing. SafeRent isn't the only tenant screening algorithm. There are dozens. And housing advocates say this kind of bias is baked into most of them. So first, an algorithm decides what you pay. Then, another algorithm decides if you're even allowed to live there. Let me put this in perspective. RealPage says its software was used to price nearly 20 million apartment units. That's roughly 1 in 3 rental apartments in America. The DOJ's antitrust chief said it plainly. RealPage was replacing competition with coordination, and renters paid the price. The settlement is a win, but critics say it's full of loopholes. RealPage can still operate, they just have to use older data now. California and New York have passed laws cracking down on rent-setting algorithms. Philadelphia and Seattle have passed local ordinances. But in most of the country, nothing's changed. And here's what gets me. This was never secret. RealPage was telling landlords openly, in marketing materials, in conferences, in earnings calls, that their software would push rents higher than humans would dare to charge. One RealPage developer said the problem with human leasing agents is they have too much empathy. The algorithm doesn't have that problem. It doesn't care that you have kids. It doesn't care that your commute will double if you have to move. It doesn't care that you've been a good tenant for a decade. It only cares about one thing: extracting the maximum possible amount of money from you. And for years, that was working exactly as designed. So the next time your landlord tells you rent is going up because of market conditions, ask them, whose market? The one where landlords compete for your business? Or the one where an algorithm told them all to charge the same thing and leave some apartments empty just to keep prices high? Because those are two very different markets, and you've been living in the second one. If you find this content useful, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. See you in the next one.